we are supposed to start. We have started to record as we usually do. Today we have the first session on quality related ITU activities. Then we have some session on ADeyemi-Ejeye, and after the break it will be 5G KPI for the rest of the day. I'm happy to see, at least with the link I've used, that I got a chat function. Did you notice the email that Femi sent out, so that you can, if you use that to connect, you will get a chat functionality.
Yes, I connected to the wrong link, and Femi connected and told me and the other person who joined to move to the correct link. So
great. So now you see the chat.
Yes, and now I see the chat.
Perfect.
And Shel, could you also ask for somebody to take minutes today?
Yes. Do we have anyone prepared to take notes?
Shall I can certainly do that for the ADeyemi-Ejeye project. I'll be happy if somebody else can do it for this session. This session is about ITU quality related aspects, right?
Yeah. Maybe a suggestion there, since that is led by Julie and Alex, maybe you can help each other to do some note taking. Could that be a possibility? And then maybe Pablo could.
Oh yes, I see. Hey, can you hear me, Shel?
Yes.
Okay, I think we can do that.
Okay, perfect. And I think we have most of the day covered.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning, Yanis.
And I see our chat is working now. Thank you, Hemi.
Morning, Yanni.
So, Femi or Margaret, anything else before I hand over to Julie and Alex?
That's all for me.
That's all for me. Just to say that in terms of the recording is also being transcribed. So just in case people miss out anything, I could send out the transcription to them.
Yeah, I think that would be good, because I guess people might be interested. If they missed for one day, they might be able to see it shortly after. So
yeah, I can send it.
Thank you.
Perfect. That's excellent. Okay, by that I hand it over to Alex and Julie to take it from here. Thank you.
Okay, so Alex, can I just lead the ITU-R part, and then you can lead the ITU-T part? Is it okay?
Sure, yeah, we can do this. Can you share the presentation, and then I can just indicate the switching of slides? That would be great.
Okay. Let's see. Release. Oops. How can I share my screens?
It's already shared. I see some screen right now. It says online hosted December 15, 2021, quality related ITU activities.
Yes, but do you see my PowerPoint file?
We don't see the presentation way, but like the editing way, but it's still pretty decent for me.
Well, it looks like I'm listed as a guest. Do I have the screen?
Yeah,
Well,
you do. You
Yes.
do have
No. We do see your screen, Julie. It's just that we don't see it in presentation mode, just in the editing.
do you see
So
now?
we see the slide summary on the side.
Oh, okay.
So if you go to presentation mode, it should work just fine, Julie.
Okay. Okay, so, well, usually this one should be IRG ABQAs, but for some reasons, we did not propose this meeting during the study group meetings. So I think next time, I think you can make it propose this one as a official ITUR ABQA meetings. So during this time, we just report the current activities in ITUT and ITUR side. There are two groups right now that are dealing with quality, video quality and audio qualities. And the first one is the ITUR study group 6, and in particular working party 6C. And also ITUT, we have study group 12. So this IRG ABQA, the rapporteur group meeting was created to harmonize the effort of the two, well, initially it was 3 study groups, but currently it is 2 study groups. So during this activity, the intersectional rapporteur groups, we share informations, and if possible, we can collaborate effort to develop new recommendations. And also we can benefit, for example, like the larger groups, such as these VQEG meetings, so that we can inform them the activities, quality-related activities in ITUT side, and also the efforts from the VQEG side can be made to ITUT to be recommendations. So, well, this one is just a description of these IRG ABQA meetings. So I think this one was introduced last time. So if you want, I think you can take a look at those. So, but there was some change. I'm representing ITUR side, and Jens was representing ITUT side. But Jens expressed his desire to stepping down as a co-chair of these IRG ABQAs. So during the last study group 12 meetings, study group 12 agreed to offer these co-chairships to Alex, and he kindly accepted these offers. So now Alex is one of the co-chairs representing ITUT side. So as I said, the parents groups of this ITUR ABQA is ITUR study group 6 broadcasting service. And there are 3 working groups within the study groups. And the quality is dealt with the working party 6C. And the T side is the study group 12, performance, QoS, and QoEs. So if you go to these web pages, you can get the full description of these IRG ABQAs. So just let me introduce the recent activities ITUR study group 6. We met last December and the last November months ago. So this one is almost 2 years. We had last face-to-face meeting was 2020 February, and then we had I think it was a 3rd virtual meetings. But on ITUR side, unfortunately, during these virtual meetings, the activities kind of decreased. But hopefully that at the next meetings, which is scheduled in March, they are proposing it to in-person meeting, I think possibly hybrid. So I think with that, in-person meeting, I think we may have a better participations and also can be more productive. And there are 5, as I said, the quality issues are dealt with Working Party 6C. And there are 5 sub-working groups. And the working group 1 deals with audio part, and working group 2 is videos, and this sub-working group also dealing with the video qualities. And another big issue this day in the ITU study group 6, the broadcasting service, is HDRs. So this one is most actively attended, and we have a lot of contribution in these areas, and there are several working groups, rapporteur groups in these areas. And there is another sub-working groups. AIAV, I think, is Advanced Video Systems, something like that. And they are dealing with VR and AR. And also, I think this sub-working group closely working with ITUT question 13. And this sub-working group 5 are dealing with other matters. And last, so this is the contribution we received last meetings. As you can see here, there are not many. So I think out of 15 or 20s, usually the
Sorry, do you do the others see some slides changing? I mean, I seem to be still on.
Yeah, I also see only the 6 bullets, actually, 5 bullets.
Oh, you just seeing my PPT file?
We see the 5
No,
bullets.
yeah, we see your file, but I think we're on the wrong page. It doesn't match your description, what we see.
Oh, really?
Which page are you showing? Is it page number 5? Something?
Yeah, 5.
Okay, then we're fine then. I thought you moved on.
Yes, it's just 5. I'm just showing the web pages of ITR. Can you see the list of document here?
No, we are still seeing your PowerPoint.
Oh, still just the PowerPoint?
Yeah. I think when you opened to share, you selected your PowerPoint, not your whole desktop.
Oh, I see.
If you stop sharing and reshare your desktop, we'll see exactly what you see.
I used the GoToMeeting and the Zoom, but this one is kind of unfamiliar.
So try stop sharing, and when you open share, please select your desktop instead of one tab.
Oh,
or an
okay.
application.
What is the button for the stop sharing?
The same button on the bottom where there was an arrow now should be green. If you press on it, it should say stop sharing or something like that, at least on my app. Yes, you stop sharing now. Try again.
Okay, let's. Do you see now?
Yes, we can see. We can see
Okay.
also your browser now. Yes.
Okay, yeah, now this is perfect.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you. So we received this last meeting. We received not many contributions. So usually we should receive it 2 or 3 times. So definitely we are affected by these virtual meetings. So hopefully this will change in the next meetings. So we received this many contributions. I think if you want, I think at least you can get the list of these contributions. And I think if you have an account, you may be able to download them. Okay, so there are some progress during the last meetings, and ITR, Working Party 6C, now have a new recommendation, draft new recommendation, multi-channel stereoscopic sound system with and without accompanying pictures. And also new report, sound test, materials for advanced sound systems. So they are talking about, I think, multi-channel, I think about between 10 or 20s. And also there are several revisions of report. Most of them is related to high dynamic range televisions. So they are now making some new recommendations for the HDR broadcastings, which can be provided. So there are many issues, that the maximum brightness of displays and also backward compatibilities. So if you broadcast the HDR broadcasting materials, then materials should be received either by HDR TV monitors or the old SDR, the traditional LDR monitors. So there are some issues. And another interesting aspect is that now there are some interest, there is expressed interest in using AI techniques for broadcasting systems. So there are some activities in these areas. So I think this is the summary of ITR side. Is there any questions?
So are there any?
Yes, please.
So
I'm surprised.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Margaret, you go first, please.
I'm really surprised that attendance is down in ITUR. Are there any thoughts on why?
Well, it may not be attendance. I think it's the contributions. I think
okay.
Attendance.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah. But I think because these virtual meetings, I think many of them, they have their own task and they have to attend this meeting additionally. So it's kind of double load. So also the time is not so perfect. So there are some difficulties to accommodate this, all the peer representative around the world. Okay, please. Yes.
Yep. So it is great to see that we are having reports regarding HDR TV and production and their testing materials. So is there any submission for cell phone, or for example for mobile phone or laptop screens, or it is only for TV?
No, this one, the title of this working study group is the broadcasting. So usually they are dealing with broadcasting. On the other hand, there are the mobile reception of a broadcasting service. So it may include some smartphones. So now they are also considering broadcasting through the mobile devices. But most test materials here is kind of for the TV monitors. And also they are collecting a lot of UHD materials, and they are just submitting new test materials, for example, for UHD. Some of them may not be free, so you have to pay for it. But I think that is 2 to 5 years, this one. So there you can find the many materials for HTTP and UHTTP. Yes, please, Yanis.
Hi, it's Andy.
Sorry. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Hi, Charlie. Chair of Working Party 6C. Just to pick up on what you've said, absolutely agree with what you've said, but just to pick up, one of the reasons we are seeing fewer attendees and fewer contributions is we are actually running on empty. Quite a lot of the work we now need to be achieved requires laboratory subjective testing in this area. And of course, we haven't been able to get, as with everybody else, a number of people back in. And because of our meeting cycle being so long, if you like, we're lagging behind, I would say, 6 months, the impact of the pandemic. So we were, I would say, until last week, just seeing that laboratories returning back, and I was hoping for quite an increase in contributions around the brightness components and new test material to come in March. Unfortunately, I've just noticed that 2 or 3 of our organisations have just closed early for Christmas and hoping to reopen next year. So the reason is we were running on empty at the moment. We were okay with lots of work to do for the first year of the pandemic, but like many other people that needed to get subjective testing in laboratories around the world, so yeah, and people sharing these results, it's been curtailed. So I'm a bit concerned if this current Omicron version goes on for a bit too long, we will see a delay until September 22 before we get new contributions, and that is rather damaging for a lot of organisations. The other thing I was just going to say is within 6C, we can deal with any delivery platform. Our remit is broadcast, but it's content creation for broadcast by any means, and by broadcast I also mean distribution. So based on contributions, we can deal with anything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, I like to raise attention to that some of ITR Working Party 6C recently developed very important recommendations, for example, for new HD system and new color systems, and which has a great impact on the display and the broadcasting communities. For example, I think it's the BT2100. I think that describes a new color format, which greatly increased the color gamut, and also that also has a great impact on the display manufacturing companies, and also that the new program exchange. So I think if you're working in this area, I think we need to take a look at the recent development of a new recommendation of ITR Working Party 6C, because I think that will impact on the quality and the production of this new UHD TV areas. Also, as I said, this HDR is now a big issue. So I think that in the future, I think there will be, we have some report and recommendation, important ones, but I think in the future, I think more recommendation and report will coming out in these areas.
QND, would you mind if I say one more thing before
yes, please.
we move on? I've been in a couple of meetings, and I know several people on this call. We've been discussing new inputs to BT500, which is still very valid and very current. I'm very keen that BT500 starts to expand to recognise the different delivery platforms, different environments, and different areas of video content creation, so image creation, to make it to keep its relevance. It can still do analog. It can still do anything else. Up to 32K if you wanted it to do image formats. But what it must take account of is changes to statistical representations, new methods of doing subjective testing, and primarily new methods of viewing content. So I'm very keen to keep involved with VQEG and its groups, so that we can make sure that there is at least one document that can cover all image creation and subjective testing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further comments or questions?
It's me now, Yanis.
Yes, please.
I raise my hand, but so quickly to on this point, Andy, we have, I think, quite not only we as Meta, but in general, many participants here at VQEG have been conducting what we like to call mobile viewing experiments. So we went a little bit, let me use the word ad hoc. What I hear from you is that there is a imminent, I don't want to call it dire, but definitely very, very urgent need to propose some standard on how viewing of mobile displays should be done, at least for subjective testing. Am I interpreting correctly your call?
Yes, to some extent. I mean, my key one at the moment, if I wanted to take the 6C remit, which is program production and international exchange, so in other words, within the organisations creating and buying and selling content, is to put in a new viewing environment that is about operational viewing. At the moment, all we have in BT500, for example, is laboratory. Where we're doing absolute testing, subjective testing, if you like, if there is such a thing, and the home environment. But more than 90% of our content never goes through a laboratory, unless it's a new format. Most of our content goes through an operational area, and there is no standardized viewing environment for operational areas. And when we come to the consumer or the home environment, there is only one. But as you've just suggested, there are now more than one. I would say there are at least 3, possibly 4 different environments for targeting content. So the BT500's new format, which is much more modular, can accommodate the idea of not just different content creation ideas, but also content delivery and content consumption areas, and how each one is applied. Laboratory is great if you want a new codec, if you want a new format, but the consumer environment is not good enough, if you like, for consistency across content exchange between organisations. And as you've just suggested, there is nothing for viewing content on a portable or a mobile device. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. And that, I think, is a good signal for us to perhaps trigger some kind of project, Margaret and all.
Yes, also Yanis, as you may know, that ITUR had several recommendations for subjective testing method. And the first one is most widely known is the BT500, but after that, we developed several recommendations for subjective test for HD, for example, HD, the HD and the UHD and 3D and the multimedia environment and export viewings. So we had several recommendations, and some of them may be related to the mobile receptions. So since we have so many recommendations for subjective testing method, we try to combine them last 10 or 15 years, but it failed. But fortunately, as Andy came as a chair, finally succeeded as a combine into one recommendations. That's a revision of BT500. So I think you may be covered by the existing method, or it might be slightly different. But I think if you have a good result, I think I would encourage you to submit some contributions for possible inclusion or possible revision of BT500. I think because then maybe also kind of a growing market for multimedia consumptions.
Thank you, Chukrim.
Okay, is any further comments or questions of ITUR, in particular Working Party 6C? Okay, and thank you very much. I think then we can continue to ITUT side. Alex, do you want to share your screen, or can I just do it?
Yeah, I can share. No problem.
Yes, you might be able to do that.
Give me a moment. I'm also not a Microsoft Teams pro. Do you see my screen now? Does it work?
Yes, wonderful.
Good. Yeah, thanks. coming to the ITU-T study group 12 part, right? Am I right here? Yeah. So there are a few related questions. There's actually one missing with it, which is added, and I will edit for the version that is to be shown on the VQEG server. Margaret, I will send you an update about this. I skipped this. Right. So there's question 9, right? Perceptual-based objective methods and corresponding evaluation guidelines for voice and audio. So there's an indirect link. There are some activities running there which are kind of overlapping with some other activities which are related to video. Then we have Q13, 12, and there's one missing here, which is Q10, 12. There is a slide added to describe what they're doing. That is mostly related to the IMG topic, right? So that question 10, 12 is dealing with telemeeting assessment, right? So especially XR meeting assessment, and there's going to be a dedicated presentation on this on Friday. Then there's Q13, 12. It's quality of experience, quality of service, and performance requirements for multimedia applications. So that's more like a holistic group where things like gaming requirements, augmented reality requirements, VR requirements, and also related opinion models are typically standardized in. What do I mean by opinion models? Those are these planning models for which study group 12 has some legacy. For example, this E model, I'm not sure you know this kind of speech-related model, and then subsequently also some video telephony related models, G1070 and the like, and this E model is G107. These are somehow coming from ITU-T study group 12. And these more audiovisual related ones of these opinion models are actually standardized under this Q13. Q9 is, of course, for those who are also dealing with audio among you, relatively renowned for the standards P863 and P864, which is P862, P863, and so on. This Polka and PESC standards, which for full reference speech quality assessment. Then there's Q10, which I mentioned just earlier, and which I will come to in a couple of minutes. And then there's Q14. That's the question that I'm co-leading. That's the development of models and tools for multimedia quality assessment, packet-based video systems, so it's monitoring tools primarily. And then Q19, 12, and Julie, maybe you can later on take over again when these slides come up. That's the question led by Julie Lee. On objective and subjective methods for perceptual audiovisual quality, and this is the question that hosts the classical legacy subjective test methods that are under the ITU-T video quality assessment umbrella, right? Of course, we have just mentioned BT500, but then we have P910 and the like, and these are typically hosted here by this question 19. So this, question 9, there the the rapporteur is Jens Berger, who was already mentioned earlier on, and the running work items here is PAMD, perceptual approach for multidimensional analysis, PSAMD, single-ended perceptual approaches for multidimensional analysis, then PONRA, perceptual objective noise reduction quality assessment, and then PML guide. That's a general standard on machine learning guidance. These here are all speech related, but it's, I think, interesting for VQEG as well. So how do you analyze a speech quality signal based on individual, ideally orthogonal dimensions, and how can you analyze them individually? And then this would be the corresponding single-ended, so well, no reference, we would call it here, I guess, approaches for multidimensional analysis. Yeah, and the idea is that you figure out what kind of degradations do you have in the signal. So let's say we have any kind of our typical models here at VQEG, and then we actually know what the degradation types are that are included. There have been such multidimensional approaches also previously at some instances been shown here at VQEG, but I don't think we currently have any video-related multidimensional model that is being standardized or, that is frequently used, let's say. Multidimensional really meaning I am analyzing in some sort of orthogonal way the degradation such as noise and sharpness and the like. Okay. Just confused now because something new went out here. Okay, you still see my slides, right? There's some window popped up. Is it okay, or?
Yeah.
We see
Yes.
we see the same
Okay,
slide.
super. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, then PONRA is specifically dealing with noise reduction quality assessment, and yeah, and I already spoke about this more general document here. Yeah, then there's probably more for later reading. There's a summary. You know, this is each time taken from the status reports. You know, the overview sort of. There is a link to the corresponding contributions here, which are you know, sent into ITUT 10 or a couple of work days before the meeting, and then are published. And these temporal documents, as you know, I suppose, are created during the meeting or at any time between meetings, obviously, but only the editors of certain standards can do that. I mean, just for those of you who are not so familiar maybe with ITUT approaches. And yeah, so you see here the different advancements, but since this is not so much video related, but more speech related, I would move on. And of course, you can at any time contact me if you have any questions about these speech topics. That's also interesting for us. So then just let me know. Okay, then this was the question that was previously missing on the short list. So that's the question 10 here. And here the co-rapporteurs are Gunilla Berntsson from Ericsson and Jan Toskovernek, who's now at a college in Stuttgart, but he is actually taking part here on behalf of TU Ilmenau in this question. And there are currently two active work items. One is this G.Telemeetax, which is a taxonomy of telemeeting, QE and QES assessment. And telemeeting here really encompasses also classical video telephony systems like the one we're currently using here, right? And then the more future-directed versions of this, which will be, as I said, dealt with also at the IMG meeting on Friday, is P.QXM, which is on QE assessment of extended reality meetings. Yeah. And there have been a few corresponding contributions to this question for the last meeting, which happened in October. I should probably have mentioned this. So it's relatively recent. October 2021 was the preceding meeting, held online, obviously. Yeah, and so this contribution here is always, you have to always imagine the C here in addition if it's just a number. So C607, that was some overview, a very interesting document about different standardization activities with relevance for this XR meeting topic. Then there was a contribution on P.int VR, which is a work item on the subjective test methods for interactive virtual reality. So again, interesting more for IMG, I suppose. Then the updated baseline text for this P.QXM that I mentioned earlier, so this XR telemeeting assessment. And then there is another work item which was not previously mentioned. It's another question which, however, is also primarily voice related. It's in question 15, but collaboratively with this question 10 here. Sorry, this is wrong here. Of course, this should read question 10. I'm sorry about this. I will correct this, obviously. Yeah, this question 10 part is a bit buggy. I'm really sorry about this. So the CMVTQS is actually a joint work by question 10, question 15, and question 14, because it contains both audio and video related aspects, but it's also communication related. So this is basically the aim here is some monitoring model for video telephony services, right? So it is somehow related with multiple questions, because there's one question 15 which is dealing with communication related, speech communication related things. Question 14 is, as you know, video related, and question 10 is this telemeeting question. And so this work item G.CMVTQS is a joint work item between these questions. And there was a subjective test report here from the corresponding institutions mentioned here. Good, then question 13. Here the co-rapporteurs are Kazuhisa Yamagishi from Entity and Rachel Wang from Huawei. As I said, this question really encompasses a multitude of multimedia-related aspects, right? So there's one work item G.ODP here, which is on QS metrics for the impact of fixed geographical structures on telephony quality and call stability, right? So specific call-related work item. And then there's G.OMMOG, that's an opinion model for mobile online gaming, right? So as I said, gaming, opinion models, gaming, this is in this question here. Then QE5G, QE factors for new services in 5G networks, QEAR, as mentioned earlier. So again, some factors in this question, and now in this case for augmented reality services. Yeah, and then this, you know, again here, this 5G services, the counterpart here is the factors recommendation being worked on, and this is the requirements recommendation being worked on. I think most of you are familiar with this terminology, right? That these standards, while they are currently still under development, they have this kind of letter code here, right? And then these are replaced by numbers. I think you all know this. And then there's this GSDR5G QE, which, sorry, this I remember. So then there's these two supplements here. These are, again, influencing factors, in one case on high definition alerting tone services. And then this one here for multi-view video services, right? So, and then there's G1035, which is on influencing factors for virtual reality services, and this has been relatively recently standardized, and it is currently under further extensions and revisions. There were a few contributions to this question as well, coming from different companies. So one was here about these QE factors for augmented reality. And then there are some baseline documents here for this GSDR 5G QE and these two supplements here. But yeah, and then this contribution was already mentioned earlier in the Q10 context. It's this document about the XR meeting and the standardization work going on in different questions. Yeah, and then comes question 14. That's the one that I'm co-leading, as I mentioned earlier. We have currently the set here of running projects still. So there's the P120X guide, which is actually now we should add, besides P1201 and P1202, we should add .3 and 4 also. So it's an overview of the different standards that this group has developed on video quality assessment, right? So there's now a whole variety of these standards, you know, that P1204.3, 4, and 5, the bitstream hybrid and reduced reference, which is equivalent to a full reference model, right, which comes from this P1204.X standard series, have been standardized in Q14 in collaboration with AVHD, with the AVHD project, and so it was a nice collaboration between VQEG and ITUT Study Group 12. And we still have not closed, although we currently have no idea how this will be ending. We have not closed the two work items on the two really low level, say, parametric metadata-based video quality models, right? So .1 is basically a mode 0, which means you just take the bitrate and resolution and some stalling related information for you know, for then the longer case, but in the short-term case, just the bitrate, the encoder, what kind of codec was used, and resolution and video frame rate and predict quality, right? And then the .2, you have in addition some frame level type statistics. So you know the size of frames and this kind of thing, in order to predict video quality, right? So short-term video quality. And then if you have these same type of models in a longer-term sense, then you would add some some things like stalling and initial loading to this. Yeah. Okay, then Another work item is PBQCG. That's a parametric bitstream-based quality assessment for cloud gaming. And this is comprising two parts, one active, so interactive component, which really is I am actually using cloud gaming during operation, right? So I'm really playing. And the other one is passive one, where it is more about the video representation and coding, that is going on in this online gaming context. Then we have, this is a very active project here, and we're actually quite well advanced with this. So to actually prepare some online tests, and it's a collaborative approach here in this case. Then there's P.Diacosi. Let's take these, by the way, this P1204 standard series, we have presented that, I think, at not the last, but the second to last VQEG meeting in depth. So if you're interested in this, this standard series has been presented there in much detail. Okay, then P.Diacosi is actually related with that. That's why I'm mentioning it, and also to this P1203 standard series on adaptive streaming. This is about, say you have now some score, right, of this, this model, and you want to know what is the dominant factor in this model that actually has mainly catering for the specific QE score that you're getting. So it's basically a diagnostic framework wrapped around existing standards, and this activity is also quite well advancing, and is primarily driven by NTT. Then P.Mosquito, that goes hand in hand with this PNUTS phase 3 thing here. So, as I mentioned earlier here, we're looking here into short-term video quality, but this P1203 standard, which I hope you know, is actually providing a long-term integration of these short-term scores here. And this PNUTS phase 3 here is basically the more future-proof extension of this to more timely or current user behavior when it comes to longer video sequences. Now, and here we're speaking really about, say, up to 5 minute long sequences. So a typical YouTube or the like streaming session for a specific content that is not like a full movie or so. And the idea here is that you have some combination of initial loading, the per 1 second video quality and per 1 second audio quality, and then of course corresponding quality switching events and the stalling that may happen in between. And all this should be integrated into one MOS score. That's one branch of this model, and the other branch is, you could imagine that people are quitting the service while watching, because they are too annoyed by some problems occurring, right? And so this model will also predict for the first time, a quitting probability. So how many of your users are in percent likely to quit? Okay, and sorry, switching and this P.Mosquito here is basically the subjective test method that comes along with this PNUTS phase 3. And due to the pandemic situation, we're more and more moving to inclusion of crowdsourcing as well. And correspondingly, we have run some first pre-tests on this crowdsourcing as well. If you are interested in these activities here at Q14, we have weekly calls every Thursday at 11 o'clock CET. And we are more than happy to welcome new people. I mean, all of these items are discussed there. More than happy if we can welcome new interested parties in joining our calls, which I think over the time will provide a good overview of what we're doing. And of course, we're happy if you get active on this as well. PNUMS phase 2 is related to unreliable delivery. So it's basically the legacy of these standards here, P1201 and P1202. So if you have actual packet loss that you can see in the picture, so it's a bit of a dormant activity here. So we have just not closed it yet. So primarily active PNUTS phase 3, P.Mosquito, P.Diacosi, PBQCG. These are the 4 very active or more active work items. There have been a few contributions here. Some of them are about this PBQCG here, as you see, right? So first progress reports and test method descriptions for the interactive and passive components, right? And also including this crowdsourcing aspect. And then there are some reports that are related with what happens when you do certain things in the crowd or basically in a web browser, right? And yeah, and then there's a a set of new work items proposed here by China Mobile, and what we discussed during the meeting is for all of these we were kind of asking the colleagues to provide a bit of more clarification also with regard to those work items previously mentioned that we're currently running. Yeah, and then Piero Diacosia mentioned that, right? So these are just input documents for those work items. Okay, that concludes Q14. I don't know, Julie, do you maybe want to continue with Q19? We're almost done with the presentation anyways, but
okay.
That's good if you take over for this. I can continue sharing. You just tell me when I should go ahead.
Well, I think it might be better if I control it.
As you like, then I stop sharing. Sure, absolutely.
Oh, yes. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we
Yes.
see your PowerPoint.
Okay, so question 19 has 5 work items. JDON no reference. This one is the famous one because it has been in existence for at least more than 15 years. Well, is it not because we haven't worked? We tried several times. I think it was from the multimedias and then HD, and then after several, we have made several efforts, but the performance was not good enough to make this recommendation. But recently we are receiving contributions that proposing no reference method based on deep learning method. And it looks like that their performance is much better compared to the traditional no reference method, which use, for example, such a measure such as blockiness or blurrings. So I think it might be that we may have some better performance with the deep learning method. On the other hand, with deep learning based NL method, it may be provide good performance, but their performance has to be tested independently using new data set. But I think that if I look at the presentation of Margaret yesterday, I think that I'm less optimistic, but we hope that we get some good result in the future. So we will develop some recommendation or report in these areas. And there is the second work item is optical transmission, optimizing bitrate and transmission resolution by considering display characteristic and available bandwidth. And the third one is the source video quality. Well, this one is also related to NL method. This one was started because at the request of IPTV providers. Now with IPTV providers, they have hundreds of new materials, and the user can choose among thousands of the materials. But the problem is that they are using communication channels, so their available bandwidth may be changeable. But some contents coming from the standard definition, some come from even poorer qualities. So they want to find out the optimal bitrate and resolutions. Obviously, you do not want to transmit standard definition program at the UHD resolutions. So this project work item was initiated at once, but this one is essentially the no reference method. So this one is kind of maybe made a little progress, but with the deep learning based method, we may have some better result. And also next work item is also QUHD. This one is also related to NL method, but this one is related to UHD video qualities. And they found that when the UHD program is available, the quality improvement compared to the Full HD is not that much. In particular, if you take your shoot in the outside, for example, in the cloud day or windy days, well, there's really not much difference between UHD and the Full HDs. So there are some need, in particular by the broadcasting companies, that instead of transmitting at UHD resolutions, at the sending some contents, for some contents using the Full HD may be just as good as the UHD resolution depending on the qualities. But in studio program, I think at that time the illumination is perfect. So in such environment, UHD is definitely better. But in the outdoor shootings, so there are many other factors that cannot be, that is out of control of the cameramans. So there are some issues to how to determine that some program may be really benefit from the UHD resolution broadcastings, some maybe not. So we try to determine which one meet the UHD quality standard. So, but this one is also kind of NL method. So this one also made some slow progress. We made several efforts, but result was not that good. But as I said, now the last few years, deep learning method may have some new insight into these problems. And during the last meetings, we revised the P.910 using the new analysis method proposed by Netflix. This method has been adapted already in P.913, but as you know, the P.910 is more widely known among the communities. So the same procedure is now included in the P.910, and the revision of this recommendation, I think is the final stage of, I think it's the last call. So I think if nothing happens, I think that this revision will be approved maybe early next year. So congratulations again to Z. And we received several contributions. I think interestingly, all of this one is related to deep learning method and NL method. And so I think there are also two additional contributions from Mobile China, but that was addressed to P.9, addressed to question 14 and question 19. So, but here I just listed also this one, these two remaining two is also addressed to question 14. So I just briefly introduced their contributions. It's a brain-inspired image quality assessment method based on, I think it's EEG, it's a long word, EEG feature learnings. And the C.970 is a perceptual image restoration with generative models and degradation learnings. And also this one is from contribution 5676 is from Netflix. That is to propose to revise P.910, including the new analysis method. And an additional contribution is a feasibility of deep learning method for source quality monitoring at the head end. So I think some right now, so there are some activities that there are effort that using deep learning method to make some progress on some of the work items. So I think this will conclude the description of P.913. And I think currently next ITOR XG meeting, 6th meeting is March 7 to 18th. So I think as I remember, we planned to meet in person, right, Andy? So I hope so that we can meet in persons. And then next ITUT study group 12 meeting is, I think, currently scheduled June 6th, 7th to 17th. So I think this will conclude this ITU all activities. Any questions to Alex?
Julia, I raised my hand mostly for you. We can
Oh,
go
okay,
back to the question 19 points that you mentioned, starting with the good old Jane or F. Could you go back to the list? Yeah. So here, I keep seeing the second item, right, OPTR. And my question is, I don't see here any reference to this work on considering signal characteristics. The title says method for optimizing bit rates and transmission resolution by considering display characteristics and bandwidth. So I'm trying to understand what that really entails. Is it just saying I have a 1080p monitor, please don't send me anything higher than 1080p, which is, allow me to say, common knowledge today? Or does it go beyond that?
No, I think this one is for mobile, in particular, the mobile receptions. So if you're watching, for example, using 6-inch mobile phones, and we did a lot of experiment for this subject. So we found that if you're using when this was started, the majority of a smartphone is something like between 4 and 5 inches. So if we use a 5-inch smartphone, it doesn't make any sense to send receiving materials at the full resolutions. And also, if there are even very small quality difference between the 720p or 540p.
So sorry to interrupt you. So basically it says what is the effective display resolution then, as I like to call it, right? Considering the size and the distance from the display. But my key point is, again, assuming you have determined that you have a 4-inch, it is in whatever 3 feet away, and therefore the maximum effective resolution that an observer can see is 540p. And that's math, right? There is nothing there. After that, the discussion is, should I be sending 540p at a certain bit rate? Or it's better for me to send even 360p, considering that the content has low frequencies. That's why I'm asking.
Yes. That covers by this statement. But if the available bandwidth is, for example, less than 100K, because this is mobile reception in the crowd areas. So if available bandwidth is, let's say, 100K, then what is the best options? Okay. Sending 720p at 400K or 360p at 100K.
Got it. So for this one, then, thank you for clarifying. Now it's more clear to me what this action item, this work item is about. And allow me to say that it appears to me that the industry has already solved this. Maybe it hasn't been standardized for anyone else to sort of benefit in a broader way, but all the convex hull approaches that a number of companies have proposed, and they have been very public about how they implement it and how they take advantage, of the psychovisual characteristics and all the other items. In my opinion, in my humble opinion, has already solved this problem. So I'm wondering whether in this a case where ITUT is chasing what is already the de facto standard rather than the other way around. That's my comment. Thank you.
Yes, I understand. I agree there with your opinion. I think this one is kind of old work items, but I think after that, as we know that the OTT service was this market increased substantially. I understand that they have their own method optimizing these ones. So I think they have their own method, and maybe I think a very good method, but So I think, unfortunately, I think they may not be aware of this effort in ITU side. So I think if we have some good understandings of these areas, and if you would like to make into recommendation, because I think that big companies such as YouTube, such as some big company, may have their own solutions and the good solutions, but there are some others than small companies. They may benefit from this kind of recommendations because they do not have enough resource to dealing with these issues. So I think if they can make some contribution based on their working experience, I think it will be a good.
Understood. Thank you.
And this is Margaret. I also raised my hand. On the topic of the no reference metrics, I would be happy to talk about that at some other time. My biggest concern with testing no reference metrics is if one vision goes into the data sets, the creation of the data sets for training them, the no reference metric could look much worse or much better than it really is in general use. And that's a tricky situation for international standards where these validation tests typically give a fairly similar vision to how the test should be designed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I really think your presentation yesterday was very interesting, and also I think that because I think you did a very good experiment using the some published method, but for those methods, their code, their algorithm is available, so anybody can test it. But I think not only this no reference, I think some all the existing, even the ITR standard, if their code is publicly available, then if they are verified independently, their performance may also may show some variations. So that cannot be avoided. I think also we have some uncertainty for any objective quality assessment method. So I think we have to deal with, you have to accept that, but hopefully that we can make some improvement. So I think with the VQEG has some, I think, a non-project. Also, I think hopefully that their effort produces some result and they can propose their method to be standardized in the ITR. Okay, so I see Chris, hand raised.
Hi, yeah, this is Chris from the BBC. A question for Alexander around the PNATS phase 3. You mentioned that it was sort of targeting session lengths of up to 5 minutes. One of the things the BBC is interested in is being able to score quality of sessions that are longer than that, so 30 minutes and upwards. I was just wondering if there are any plans for doing something that might cover longer sessions. I'm kind of guessing it's quite difficult to get perceptual scores for sessions that are quite long, but I was wondering if there are any plans for that, or there are any methods for extrapolating from user results for shorter sessions, 5-minute sessions, to longer session lengths.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Thanks very much for that. We have been thinking about such longer sessions a few times, right? Both in the group, but also in our research lab ourselves. Different thoughts about this. So as you said, it's pretty difficult to run such tests really in the lab, right? And keep people sufficiently focused. Also, partly because it is not so easy to get source content that is sufficiently interesting that we could just use officially for such tests, right? But I wouldn't rule it out, right? So it's a collaborative approach, this standard standardization work, PNATS phase 3. So it's there are some active parties, but you know, I don't know if we had some indication that this is interesting to also have maybe a certain subpart of this being focusing on even longer sessions, right? I wouldn't rule out that this is possible in this project, right? Absolutely not. And so I would be very interested in this, I must say. So do you think it is possible that you join one of our meetings? Or
yeah,
is this a possibility?
Definitely interested to find out more and join.
And I think that would be great because, I mean, partly this work obviously is contribution driven. I mean, it is in this case because it's a group that has been working on such video quality models, especially for this adaptive streaming context for a while. Some of the things are often coming from this group, right, which is already there. But we're very happy if there are new contributions from the outside, providing new momentum.
Great, thanks.
Andy, please.
Yeah, and Chris, I don't know if you know me, but that's really interesting work. And I've been thinking about some things. I don't know how we can tie some of the issues we have in content production together with what you've suggested about the longer and the shorter. We all know that we can survive a news item of 30, 40 seconds at incredibly low quality. But we can't do it for very many days. So and the BBC has been has had issues with this when not upping the quality of content during breaking news stories. After 2 or 3 days, unless that quality goes up, it's people start to get fatigued. So we've already got some quality of experience ideas around lower quality initial work or initial content and not being upped to higher quality for later, and that can be extrapolated across to longer content. And I just wonder if coming back to this crowdsourcing idea, that for longer content, is it so important that we have as much control over the source material? If we are looking at multiple thousands of contributors, as opposed to smaller groups looking at, I would say, known quality of material. Thanks. I'm sorry, I wasn't very clear on that. The idea is we get complaints about some channels with low data rates on traditional broadcast and some streaming services, and we also get complaints with the idea that you can restart a program by going, say, from a broadcast version, over-the-air broadcast version, linear, to an on-demand version if you want to restart a program after it started. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's also, again, a very interesting question. My main worry is really the interestingness of the content, so to speak, right? I mean, obviously, if you go towards a field test, and of course the big players such as Netflix or YouTube and the like, they have their own data supposedly, especially when it comes to behavior, right? I mean, them quitting a service or so is obviously known to them, right? And then if there are technical parameters, you can link this with such a quitting in quotation marks. Now, having such a model being developed that also predicts the opinion gets a bit more complicated, because then obviously you could ask the subject at the end of a normal viewing of a normal, say, episode or whatever they're currently watching. You could ask people for a Moss rating after viewing that, right? But it's probably also a bit annoying. I mean, in telemeetings and video conferences, this is typically done by companies, right, to ask this. And then you can use, you would be using, or that company would be using real life content, obviously, right? But it's very difficult for such a standardization project. We had this experience, unfortunately, to use such content because you don't normally find a lot of interesting, high enough resolution content that has those 30-minute duration, right? For example, this is the key problem, and that we would have the right to distort and apply different adaptive streaming type degradations to, right, and so forth. So it's really this IPR of content issue and also quality of content issue which kicks in. And then what you can certainly find 30-minute long content or footage you can use, but that's then typically very boring. And then presenting that to subjects in 30 minutes, you have to watch a super boring content for 30 minutes. Pooh, that's painful. Those are the...
This is a couple of ideas, and apologies for those that don't know the program. We have a program on one of our public service channels here called Gogglebox, where it's watching people watching TV, which is really interesting. But they are set a task of watching certain programs, and it's been sort of bugging me for a little while. And Katie Nolan, Chris, I don't know if you know Katie Nolan. You know Katie Nolan, don't you, Chris, from BBC R&D?
Yeah, she's the same.
Yeah. yeah, did the test of viewing distances, lighting conditions in houses, which was effectively crowdsourced. It was an open test. We know the specifications of certain platforms. We know that people watch on multiple platforms, from streaming services, same content on streaming services, linear TV, UHD on Sky Q, etc., down to or across to watching it on a mobile phone in the train. And maybe there's something we can do here with crowdsourcing of longer content, where there is a popular program, a popular series. We just ask for comments on the quality, knowing that we're going to have several thousand contributions that we can distill data from, knowing very little information other than what they watched it on and where they watched it. Thanks.
Yanis, please.
And thank you. Thank you, Juhi. So a quick comment on Andy's question, even though for those, of course, who know my background, I used to be at Netflix. So when I was there, I helped open source material that totals roughly 30 minutes, Alex. And I know that, one can argue that it's not the most interesting, but I don't know, for those who watched all 8 minutes of it, it's actually pretty nice. It's a pretty nice, documentary style, high quality content about Mexico. Similarly, the Cosmos Laundromat, which was subsequently open sourced, always by Netflix. I hope, or I believe that this is not super boring, as you said. So if one puts enough effort and, create a collage of about 30 minutes of this content, I argue that this could be both interesting and used for this purpose of long-term, long duration testing. These are my thoughts here. Thank you.
Maybe in direct reply, I fully agree with you, Johannes, right? So I was not saying that there's no content, right? It's just there's not so much, but I agree. I mean, there are some things which you could probably do, right? I agree with you. That's a good point, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no further questions, Margaret and Shares, how many hours are assigned to this slot? Can you have some 5 or 10 minutes for the project that was started from this IRJ VQA meetings, but it is now belong to the VQEG. But I think the output of this project may be a contribution to ITU-R and ITU-T. So can you talk about just to know the progress of this project?
So we had scheduled, I don't have the schedule in front of me right now, a couple other discussions in this same time slot, but by all means, take 10 minutes to discuss this other topic.
Okay, so Yanis, could you tell us the progress in this project?
Absolutely, and actually, I hope it will take less than that. I very briefly talked about it in in the opening session. So if you allow me, I will simply directly, first of all, let me locate it. I will share with the group an Excel spreadsheet that we created. Sorry, Excel. I mean Google Sheet. So let me start by sharing my screen, okay, and make it more easy. Can everyone see my screen? Probably you see. Do you see the
Yes.
IGVQ? Do you see the IGVQM databases tab?
Yes, we can see yours.
Yeah. So again, just to remind people, we had established a 3-step process, more or less last time, which is 1, collect subjective databases, 2, collect circuits, right? Collect fundamentally metrics that we can run against the stimuli, and 3, perform statistical analysis. The result of these 3 will be put together in a nice report and shared with primarily standard setting organizations with our conclusions. So not much progress, but at least we were able to put together this Excel spreadsheet, and I will make sure that this will be sent over to the meeting minutes. So for now, I will Anyone can edit, so I could copy the link and I'll put it later on in our chat thread. So basically here, as you can see, again, the idea is for this to be as vast and as comprehensive as possible. The basic information about the databases is put, such as number of PVSs, number of SRCs, number of opinion scores collected, the methodology used, what is the scale. As you can see, all these happen to be discrete 1 to 5, what type of display was used, and information we have, if available, on viewing distance, if it includes scaling artifacts or only compression artifacts, the YUV format, the resolution or resolutions and frame rates, what compression standards were used whenever applicable, some more information about what we like to call encoding recipe, if available, like 1-pass CBR, 2-pass CBR, VBR, etc., and how were the conditions were used. Most important now, and this is where we start differentiating on the different tiers, and I will explain this a little bit, the availability of the sources themselves and of the PVSs is what can distinguish, say, a tier 1 database from a tier 2 and a tier 3. So a database that makes no sources and no PVSs available, it really means that we can only trust whatever metrics have already been calculated in the way that it was calculated, and has, allow me to use the word, the lowest value for statistical analysis, because it doesn't allow people to go back to the to reanalyze the data, right, and do better in all metrics. Having both sources and PVSs is ideal, because again, this allows the recalculation of all metrics, and more than that, the availability of the raw opinion scores gives a database an even higher, I can say, weight, because that means people who want to redo, for example, statistical analysis, reanalyze, for example, using MLE, the method that was just shared by Chul here, is being adapted in P910 and P913, is feasible. So in the tiers, is top tier are the databases where absolutely everything is available and open source, from raw scores to sources to PVSs, and why not even reproducibility with what codec was used in what recipe. So anyone who can take the source and reproduce and recreate that PVS would actually verify one more time what exactly was used. Then the second one are the ones where you have partial availability, maybe only the source, so you can calculate some, maybe, or sorry, only the PVSs, where you can only calculate some no reference, but not necessarily all the full reference metrics. And the least, I can say, valuable are the ones where you have no sources and no PVSs, but just a list of scores with existing quality metrics. And for those who have metrics, are they available per frame or on the aggregate? And finally, a link where people can get that information. So what I'm inviting here, the entire group, is to please populate as much as you can. This, we can maybe make it better if we set like I would like this to be an open process, so there should be a deadline that, you know, we have up to a certain date, and then a new seat will open here for contributors of metrics and packages that can be used to calculate metrics. And the first thing that comes to my mind is the libvmaf package, which is open source, and in itself includes roughly 7 or 8 standard metrics, including PSNR, SSIM, multi-scale SSIM, VMAF, but also a wider set that is currently being adopted by AOM. So I think it is a good starting point, but it would be beneficial for other proponents of other metrics to make available some way of running and obtaining the corresponding metrics. Okay, so this is the status. Are there any questions from, and a big thanks to all who already took the effort to contribute, primarily Margaret and Werner so far. And Kingston, yes, thank you. And to Yulma now. Any questions or comments where we are today?
Margaret and Lucian, Margaret, please.
After we finish talking about this, could you add the link to that document to the meeting minutes so that people
I
can.
already did that.
Okay, thank you.
Werner is always ahead of me, no matter what I do in life.
Oh, come on.
Thank you, Werner.
Okay, so Yanni, so when is the reasonable target date? Oh, and then Lucian, yes.
Yeah, let's hear from Lucian and let's go back to a reasonable target.
Yeah, okay, so Lucian, please.
My only small question is, are we interested in some secret data sets as well? So the data set that someone is willing to run a metric on, but cannot share the sequences?
Correct, and exactly, that would be allow me to use a lower tier when it comes, because at some point this will be aggregated, right? So I assume there will be an analysis that will only focus on whatever is completely public and completely reproducible, in my opinion. At least if I were, a reviewer or an editor of the where this publication is submitted, I would value that type of analysis, because again, by its nature, you're supposed to be able to reproduce data that people publish, right? But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't use and quote with a disclaimer that this was a secret or private database that we put it basically as is, as I like to say, right? We cannot vouch for its quality or not, right? So we can include it in folding in and producing global, say, SROCC aggregate numbers, say, against PSNR. But that's a question of how do we treat the subsequent publication? In my opinion, yes, it should be put here. And the corresponding column for availability of sources and availability of PVSs would be no, obviously. Does this answer, Lucian, your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Does it make sense?
Totally, yeah, totally,
right.
in my opinion.
But
now, also, in my opinion, also there is a certain beauty because no one can really overfit to this particular data set. On the other hand, it's not so useful as well, as you mentioned. So there are some pros and cons in such data sets as well.
Correct. So now to his question, and first of all, my apologies to the group, because honestly, the number of cycles that I personally spent in this has been limited. So I take, let me use the word, full responsibility for the delay. My genuine hope would be that this would be available 6 months ago. So we're already, quote unquote, in my over what I was hoping us to, achieve. But if we say that we give ourselves the next maybe 2 months to collect both the list of databases and list of metrics with the corresponding documentation for it, we can say a tentative schedule by end of February to have concluded the data sets and the tools that we're using, and we open up to the statistical analysis phase, where any and all people who would like to be contributors, co-authors of both the final report and whatever publications come out of it are welcome to run and cross-check. And then give maybe another 2 months for analysis, and ideally 2 months for the policing and the creation of the report. So a 2-2-2 approach would be my recommendation. How does it sound to the group? Too aggressive, too loose, realistic, unrealistic?
Well, aggressive schedule is always good. We'll do our best and we'll see what happens. But I think the outcome of this project will be very interesting. I would like to see that you submit this result analysis to ITUR and ITUT so that we can take a look at them. And I think that will be a very good contribution.
Yeah, and by the way, to here, we already have received positive, or at least not negative, allow me to say, feedback from the other main recipients of this report, which are the standard setting organizations who would benefit during the development of future standards on what metrics to include in their analysis, how to evaluate them. So in my opinion, the meta-analysis of these databases and the extraction of perhaps even more targeted information about, by slicing and dicing the data, right? Which content can be better trusted, on which configuration, because apart from extracting global goodness fitness parameters such as SROCC and PLCC of a metric against all databases, I really hope that we can extract more targeted, let's say, for example, for AVC or for HVC, if we have that type of HRCs, split, or for mobile viewing, or for display, or for scaling. In other words, to shed a little bit more insight on what are the pros and cons of different metrics in different stimuli, different HRCs, and different devices. So yes, there is a demand from the industry, but yeah, I think we need to hurry up a little bit. Any other comment on this or question? Should I stop sharing? And by the way, I have started a thread. Anyone who has received that solicitation email to populate this Google spreadsheet and does not want to be part of the project, kindly email me back so that I can remove them. Anyone who has not received it and would like to be included, please send me a private email and I will add them to the temporary reflector that I created. And it can be for any of the three phases, right? For the contribution of databases, for the contribution of metrics, and for the statistical analysis and the final write-up of the report.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can Shell and Margaret, I think you can take the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful summary and all that good information. So now we will turn it over to AVHD, where we have two presentations. And on the AVHD side, Shahid, are you going to lead discussions? Or who would like to lead?
Yes, Margaret, I can do that.
Okay, and our first presentation, I think, is 208 by Mikawai. Go ahead, Shahid.
Okay, thank you.
Can you?
Okay. Yeah, Mikolai, you can already start, yes.
Okay, great, because I wasn't sure if I should wait for something or not. Okay,
and I will start taking the notes right away.
Okay. Of course, I will share the slides, so you will be able to look into the slides. Okay, great. So let me share my screen. Just wait a second. Just a second. Wrong. Sorry, once again. Okay. Can you see my presentation right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. So hello again, and this time I would like to tell you something about the project that we have started a couple of months ago. The title is the Technology for Secure and Reliable Delivery of Professional Audio-Video Contribution Live Transmissions with Lowest Possible Latency. This is a project that is made in the collaboration with a company called Quickstream, which is basically a Polish company, but they actually operate on the global market. These are not this is not a big company, but so it's likely you don't know it, but working in the nice area of the CDNs and low latency video streaming. Okay, okay, now how it works. So let me start with some introduction. So probably, as we all know, that every year there is more and more professional audio and video live transmissions being organized around the world, and obviously these are events like sports, conferences, transmissions of some meetings, events, even like our meeting, and even remote surgeries. And of course, this is becoming more and more important also because of the coronavirus pandemic that changed our life, unfortunately. So this is basically the motivation. And the problem that is commonly experienced is that the TV broadcasters and digital platforms operators and content producers, they're using they need to have a way to transmit video with a low latency while still keeping high resolutions like HD and also 4K and maybe 8K. And ensuring low latency in the streaming is quite a challenge still, because the traditional methods like satellite broadcasts or MPLS, actually they are not flexible enough and they are definitely not cost effective enough. So obviously there is a trend to use the internet, and with the internet the problems are that, well, first of all, internet is obviously usable to signal distribution, but is definitely not guaranteeing any sufficient constant connection quality parameters. And this refers here not only to bandwidth, but also to the latency, especially if this is like a hop-by-hop transmission over some content distribution network. So what we try to address in this project is to develop some new technology realizing content contribution transmissions through connecting both some methods for the single and multi-way video encoding and some new routing protocols that are suitable for low latency. And this is going to be the adaptive system that will allow, well, mainly the company, not us, I mean, not the AGH, to build a content distribution network specialized in low latency. So basically, this is going to be, of course, the product. I'm not here to advertise this product, of course. I'm just here to introduce you into the challenges we are going to have. But just to mention that the company is already providing some live signal conversion software, and they provide a software as a service platform for configuration of the distribution network. And what is going to be added here is the, I mean, next year is the next component, which is dealing with the transcoding. And basically, the transcoding is something that is probably more interesting from the point of view of VQEG and also point of view of our team, because we are aware that obviously the issue of transcoding have been researched for many years, and this is definitely not a new topic. However, what is new here is that transcoding in terms of the low latency network is still kind of challenge, and because you don't only need to take a look at the quality and the bitrate of the generated streams, but also you have to carefully watch the delay, especially if this is the multi-hop transcoding scheme where you transcode the same video several times because of the distribution network. So basically, the idea here is that we want to find the GND point that will be controlled by the QE, the quality of experience. But this is going to be done also with the consideration of the low latency. And the tools we are going to have are first the pool of codecs that can be switched on the fly in case of the content changes or network transmission parameters changes, and also the encoding parameters that could be modified on the fly. So what we want to use, of course, we want to use the experience brought from VQEG, and especially the content that was generated. I mean, these parts of the content that was made available for the research. And of course, there is a lot of content available right now, and we try to suit it to the actual use case. And the second thing is, of course, to control the quality. And I think this is no surprise that we want to use VMAF. that is actually the standard way of controlling the quality in the full reference. But of course, as also we all know, VMAF has some limitations, and we have to cope with those. Okay. And as I told you, there are like two things that we can do with the content. First of all, we can switch between several codecs. The codecs that have been considered so far is obviously, I mean, the baseline is the H.264, but of course there is a pool of other codecs that can be considered, like HEVC, VP9, AV1, LCEVC, as well as maybe even H.266 or VVC. But of course, definitely this is subject to the availability of fast production versions of this codec. And the second optimization area is, of course, changing the parameters and adopting the parameters to the content and current status of the network. So we have just started, or maybe started just a couple of months ago. I mean, we started after the last VQEG meeting, so I couldn't report anything about it that time. And now I can just announce that this is the research that we are going to make. So if anyone is interested in some collaboration, if anyone has some ideas or want to add something, that would be glad to listen to those people. And the first, let's say, major milestone that is approaching is to be able to demonstrate that actually it is possible to optimize the video quality given some specific conditions using the, let's say, state-of-the-art FFmpeg X.264 toolkit. By tweaking the encoding parameters and still keeping the VMAF quality at the, let's say, unnoticeable quality distortion level. So that presentation was not meant to be the presentation providing some results. It's definitely too early for that. It's mainly about, you know, announcing what we're going to do. So yeah, if you have any comments, I'll be glad to hear them. So any comments, any questions from the audience?
I've raised my hand. I'm not sure what's the queue situation.
Yes, Jens. I actually cannot see your hand, but you can go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I clicked twice. Apologies for this.
Oh, I can see.
Yeah. All right. And I see also Zafar. So, Mikola, this is interesting. Just a couple of pointers for you to consider already. I noticed, can you go back to the JND? I think it was the last slide, right? So you should know that.
Yeah, this one. Sorry, it's I'll go back here.
It's okay. I mean, you mentioned that you want to establish essentially the JND threshold, right? There was a massive study performed, and I think it was reported back in 2017 when I was hosting it at Netflix by Dr. J. Kuo's student at the time. Anyways, bottom line, there has been a JND study. The dataset is publicly available under IEEE. It's called Video Set. I can put the link into the chat, and perhaps for the meeting, which has already established that, right? So there is already a good study that shows specifically for AVC, because all the stimuli were AVC encoded. There is a methodology, like a bisection method, to determine the JND point. So I would say, let me say the first of the two major bullets I see here, the maximum QP level, etc., visual inspection, statistical significance of VMAF, you can definitely leverage that research as is and perhaps build on top of it. Now,
yeah, definitely, yeah.
On the second one now, perhaps I missed some part of the objective. So the objective is to optimize quality of adaptive streaming by tweaking parameters of the codec itself. That's it.
And switching between codecs.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I don't want to break the bad news for you, But a similar proof of concept analysis that I did back in 2018, never published, revealed that there are very few cases where a newer codec, an older codec can benefit over a newer codec, right? So the ability of switching, say, between AVC and HEVC, you will always prove that an HEVC stream is much more efficient and you will never switch back to AVC.
Mm-hmm.
It is only on comparable, let's say, technologically siblings, like for example, HEVC and VP9 were developed roughly at the same time, where you may find that some content is better encoded with VP9 and some with HEVC. So my suggestion is to group these codecs into generations and show the benefit of switching, say, between, I don't know, AV1 and VVC or something like that, rather than mixing and matching everything, because you will realize very quickly that the gap between different generations is so big that there is virtually no case where this can be, benefit. Now, the dynamic optimization of compression parameters is, again, what I was referring to also previously when Chulhi talked about, how can we better predict at a certain bit rate, what resolution or what QP or bit. And that, again, the pointer I can give you is the published blog by myself when I was part of Netflix, the dynamic optimizer, which was also presented in that same meeting.
Yeah,
VQEG.
I know it.
So that core can, in my opinion, can be used as a starting point for your analysis. So these are the 2 pointers I want to offer, and I'll be very happy. And personally, I have a very big interest in this topic. I spent quite a lot of my personal research, so I'll be at least monitoring. Not sure if I can contribute, but I will definitely be monitoring, and I'll be happy to hear more about your, your progress. And I'll put the links to the 2 resources, to the chat, and to the meeting minutes.
Perfect. Thank you. Just to add that we are more or less aware about these achievements. The only thing is that we have yet another factor that has to be considered here is the latency. I mean, because if you are just talking about let's say compression of files, it's actually not that important if you spend, let's say, an hour or 2 to compress. So it's quite easy to switch from, let's say, I don't know, H.264 to H.265, as long as your license allows for that, because it's just a matter of the let's say more compression time. But at the end, of course, the quality will be better. But the issue is, what happens if you really have to balance between the latency and the quality, given the certain bitrate. And so I would say, yeah, definitely would like to start from the research that you have reported. But here we have, let's say, another dimension for the optimization, which is the latency. And I believe that for most of the studies so far, the latency was not considered very much. Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if I'm wrong. Please tell me.
I see Zafar who can perhaps answer, but you are basically correct. What has been published has been targeting the VOD case, because obviously this work was done when I was at Netflix, which is by definition the VOD company. But that, again, not published, but definitely in the works. There have been quite a lot of extensions of that work into the live low latency. And for that reason, I believe there is perhaps an opportunity to collaborate further with some of my colleagues who are working on the live front at Meta. But I'll stop here because I think Zafar has been waiting patiently.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you, Yanni. Hi, I am Zafar, and I work at Meta with Yanni. So I just want to bring one important point to this discussion. Very good discussion, actually, and very close to what we work on. Is that especially in mobile devices, there is always a delay in starting a new codec, in initializing the codec. So for example, if we are doing AVC and HEVC, for example, so maybe on a lot of mobile devices, it will not be trivial either to keep both the codecs running all the time, or maybe they don't, their firmware doesn't even support that. And if we want to do it on runtime, there might be a switching delay. So that is just I think a caution for everybody.
That's a very important point. One thing to add is that we think about, the multi-hop transmission, and most likely we are not going to address the last mile, but just, the intermediate hops. So, as long as we are, on the intermediate hop, we can do whatever we want with the codecs. And, for the last hop, we can, stick to one codec in order to make the compression at the end user's device as simple as possible. But of course, if you want to address the last step, this is very important note. You're right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Because if there are no questions, I also have some small announcement at the very end, which is not much related to this presentation. But first, I would like to finish the discussion here. Unfortunately, I don't see any indicators of the raised hands right now. So if there is any raised hand, please go ahead. Okay. I hear no one. Okay. Is there any question? I only hear some noise. Okay, so I also asked Margaret and Shell if I can make a small announcement, which is not much related to this presentation, but just since I'm on the floor, they allowed me to announce a conference, actually a workshop that I'm involved in. And since the topics are quite related, well, to multimedia processing, you might be interested in, is the 13th workshop on multimedia and network information systems that is going to be a satellite workshop to the ACID conference 2022. This is the Class B in the core ranking. This is not maybe the top one. I mean, not like a class, but still a reasonable class. And yeah, we are looking forward for some submissions on the multimedia network systems. And the deadline is the end of this year, so it's like 2 weeks from now. But okay, maybe I will put it out of the record. I know this is recorded, but I will put it out of the record for sure. There is some way for the extension of a couple of days or maybe even more. The conference will take place at the beginning of June next year. For those who are interested in the physical traveling, it will be in Almaty in Kazakhstan, which also sounds quite interesting for me. But of course, if the pandemic situation is not possible, will not allow us to travel, it's going to be also online or in the hybrid form. I will also place the link to the conference in the chat window. Okay. If there is anything else, please tell me. Well, I can still theoretically come back to the previous presentation. Otherwise, that was basically everything. So thank you. Shahid, I think you can continue with the sharing.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So the next presentation is 223, and it will be presented by Andrew. It's about evaluating 8K monitors. Andrew, are you there? We have Andrew, are you there in the call? No, I guess.
I see his name in participants actively attached.
We heard Andy earlier during the the ITU discussion, so I'm sure maybe he just stepped out. What should we do? And if you can hear us.
Andrew is Andy, right?
It's
yes.
Yes, Andy.
Okay. I can see him in the call, yeah, but he's not responding.
You have two options: either break early and give back 10 minutes, ahead of schedule, or.
Well, I know the topic that Andy was interested in having us discuss is basically as listed in the presentation list, how to evaluate 8K monitors where the resolution is very high, and it was during our last session. Oh, Andy, you're back.
Andy, you're back.
Apologies,
Please,
I'm
go
really
ahead.
sorry. I had a call from my daughter just then, and I'd taken my headset off. Sorry, apologies for that.
It's your turn.
Yes, I don't actually have a presentation to put to you, but you have just summed this up exactly. What I'm really interested in, and the reason I don't have a presentation is because I can't hear. I'm sort of battling with this idea of how do we start to assess image quality, and this morning I had a conversation with NHK STRL where we were talking about 32K images, and one of the proposals we're looking at that's just come up, and this is going to be, I'd like this as a discussion point really than a presentation. One of the proposals we've had that's come up through the pandemic is from museums and exhibitions. On how can a new form of imaging be used to increase the attendance in museums and curated exhibitions where it's virtual and we are using images in excess of 32K to do extreme close-ups. We've seen some of this in still images, but this is now video moving images of paintings, statues, objects. And a complete aside conversation I had was with the BBC's Natural History Unit and with the RAI, the Italian broadcaster. The BBC's Natural History Unit was discussing how they were allowed into certain areas, caves and other areas where camera crews and reporters are only allowed in once every 10 to 15 years. How do we actually capture images in these areas that we can display for several years to come, incredibly high resolution with a viewing distance down to nose touching screen, I'm going to say. And the RAI were allowed into the Vatican archive to look at books and paintings and other objects which are only pulled out under very, very strict lighting conditions for very short periods of time. And it comes back to we have no methodologies for assessing images that, if we stand back and look, would seem to be perfect. But we have to acknowledge that maybe we're not going to stand back and look, that we are going to move around them. We're going to start looking incredibly close detail at some areas of them. And that area is up to the participants or the users' requirements, not the program creators' requirements. So my discussion point is we have a hold. The technology is running away with us, and if we look at what's going on in cellular phones, we see the ever increase in quality of imaging coming out of cellular phones, multiple lenses. In fact, they are getting to the point now where some of the adverts are saying Hollywood in your pocket, and they are no longer exaggerating. We're seeing professional imaging and professional lenses now being the limiting factor. Making mobile phone lenses look even more attractive because they have far fewer aberrations, being far smaller. And then we have screens that are now capable of being viewed at incredibly close distances, which we would not normally expect to do during a subjective test. Even at the 0.75 distance of 8K as a recommendation is seen to be too far a distance if you actually want to examine, say, for example, a painting's brushstrokes. And you don't want the artifacts of the image itself, either the signal or the display, to be a factor in your I can't say not enjoyment, your examination of that content. So that was really it. That is, I tried to put a presentation together, but I decided that if I put a PowerPoint together, it could never say anything other than words, and we are just talking about images here. So that is it, and I just welcome contributions and help to see if we can actually come up with what do we do about the next generation of imaging, where we're looking at 32K, 64K, and even 128K images. Thanks. That's made everybody go very quiet.
Andy, I took the usual step of raising my hand.
Yeah, I saw that, but everybody else went very, very quiet.
Yeah, I did not know. At this point, I think we'll go to free discussion here. These are my thoughts, and these are my thoughts only. They by no means represent meta or anything else here. But my opinion on the whole concept of what is after 4K, when it has two different paths: images, static images versus video. I will constrain my discussion to video because I think images, by their nature and the ability to absorb the information by scanning the image, as I like to say, it makes it a very different experience. So I'll stick and I'll make sure I talk about video, moving images only. As we all understand, human eye and the geometry, similar triangles say exactly what you said, right? The critical distance where you perceive the maximum amount of information without really doing the pixelization is 0.75 height, the display height. Now, that creates, in my opinion, even at 0.75, huge ergonomic problems, right? So the fact that in order for me to watch, I have to be so close that my neck starts hurting when I'm looking up or down or left or right, creates some non-visual but still ergonomics, physiological issues when it comes to the enjoyment of 8K, true 8K, as I say. So in my humble opinion, the ergonomics plus the size of living rooms, so the physical constraints we have in our houses, will probably lead us to the point that also Chulhi mentioned earlier, which is people will be buying 8K TVs. They will put them in the exact same living room they have. They will be sitting in the exact same couch they have, which is roughly 3 to 4 to 5 times the display height. And they will see absolutely no difference whatsoever between the 8K, 4K, or full HD. And that's an unfortunate situation because then people will perceive 8K as a gimmick, right? Because if I pay money, double the money, and I really cannot see with my eyes, I can only believe the marketing hype so much. In summary, I believe it is the ability to zoom in arbitrarily into certain portions of an 8K image as I'm sitting in 3 or 5x or 5 times the display height. That would be a very unique and interesting, how should I say, feature of higher.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and then comes the question then, okay, how do you subjectively evaluate? Do you really design a subjective test where somebody is sitting in the ergonomically sound 3 times the display height and give him or her a remote control with zooming ability where they would zoom in whatever they feel like watching at any given time? Do you ask people to sit down in 0.758 and be liable to lawsuits for people having neck pain? I think we are at some crossroads here, where we as a community will need to highlight the issues and what exactly is behind 8, 16, 32K, and make it very clear. Again, I'm talking about video now, that perhaps the only way for us to make a true evaluation of 8K quality or 16K is to go to the billboard style displays, because that's really the only case where they make sense and they really should be used, where people have the freedom to walk around the display. That doesn't give them trouble, that doesn't give them problem. They can still enjoy very high quality, always restricting their field of view on a portion of the image or video. These are my thoughts, and I'll leave it back to you and others who may have comments.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, you're not wrong, and I don't think I'm really discussing here what I would call traditional linear television anymore, and certainly it's not still images. This is we've been able to do still images at incredible resolution for some time, and let people choose which portion they crop to. Even on in domestic software, even your mobile phone will allow you to do that. I'm talking about the next experience, the interactive experience of content, where we're not governing as content creators. You're not governing where people physically look. You're not drawing their attention to the action anymore, using the standard techniques of focus and close-up and dialogue. You're actually letting people range around your content. So your content, if it's 360, would have to be minimum of, say, 4K, which I agree with you totally, is probably the maximum you could ever see in terms of resolution, and possibly slightly less than 4K. But it's 4K in any position you like, in 360 degrees or even spherically. And how would we start to assess that when we're no longer assessing the entire image, but we're assessing a parameter set, maybe designated by the production team, of where they allow you to look, or in the case of a trip around a museum or a trip down a cave that's never been opened before, wherever you please you want to look. And you would expect your quality of experience will be based on expecting the same quality no matter where you looked and no matter how closely you looked. And I sort of look at some sci-fi. I always look at sci-fi to see what's going on. And I assume everybody's watched Blade Runner. And if you remember the early scene when Deckard was looking at the identifying an image and zooming in to get a shot that was in a mirror in a bathroom, how that image was of equal quality all the way into what was a tiny portion. I'm not saying we're doing this for forensic reasons, but actually it's a very good example of what incredible resolution in production can deliver to a common resolution at home. The display you may be watching it on may be no more than HD or even 4K, but the image actually is much higher resolution, and we have to deal with that in production. So it's not necessarily how does the public perceive this image, is how do I, as a program maker, assess the quality of my image delivered to somebody who I don't know where they're going to look. I'm going to say discuss, but this is just a starter.
Okay. Any other input into this discussion? Andy, I managed to write a few lines there. Maybe you want to add something into the minutes of the meeting. And I also am not sure how will you follow up on this discussion. Is it going to be just till here, or any plan to take it further somewhere in the cause or?
Yeah, just one thing that wasn't mentioned when we did the roundup, because it's a Study Group 6 project. Study Group 6 has put together a rapporteur group to look at what's called a vision for the future of broadcasting. It's not going to be a recommendation or a report. It probably is an opinion or something out of the ITU, where we're just taking a snapshot idea of what we think is going to happen over the next 10 to 15 years. And part of that is the divorcing of production and delivery in terms of standards. The frame rate, image size, image quality, colorimetry, etc. may not be the same anymore. It doesn't need to be the same technically. Why should it be the same? And as part of that, this is some of the areas we'll be looking at. So, if you like, we're trying to get a discussion document for future production, which may be connected to delivery or may not be, but it certainly will be connected to the exchange of content between organisations. So yeah, I can add a bit more to that. You see, we have a question.
Hi, Andy. Sorry, just a question about what you just said. Is that going to only focus on broadcast, or are you focusing on other areas such as like medical or first responders, etc.?
I mean, we have to. I'm having a battle. Working Buddy 6C, although it is within the broadcast systems group, is about content creation. So it doesn't matter where it's heading, nor what that content is, nor how that content was captured. I'd probably have a really tough job suggesting it was medical imaging, but medical imaging is certainly an area that I keep across when we're looking at some of the issues we are discussing. In other words, the ability to zoom in incredible amounts, the ability to get accurate colorimetry, the ability to get stabilized images and to be able to treat them both in real time and post production. So I have to be careful, as always with the ITU, on not to overstep the remit because you get slapped down. But where input is available from other areas and we can output to other areas, we certainly do. So yeah, I will keep an eye on medical imaging, and I'm very interested in anything going on there as well. Margaret.
Okay, I'm from Margaret.
Thank you. So the scenario you described where you can zoom in on an image that really adds value to the 8K video stream, but it doesn't seem to really justify the 8K monitor itself. And
well, yeah, it's really difficult, that one, isn't it? As said, we may already be too late and be stuck with 8K because, as has been said, it's probably a gimmick whether people can see it or not. But we sort of had the same discussions about HD and SD. And that was obvious because there were technology changes, square pixels, non-square pixels being one of the ones everybody ignored, but giving us the greatest increase in quality, not just the number of pixels used. Going to 4K, okay, yes, screen sizes got much larger than expected, much faster than expected. 8K until we get to wall size screens. Or we get to usable headsets. I'm not going to say current headset, but usable headsets where the distance of viewing is such that an 8K resolution is probably required. But I don't think very large screens and 8K is a primary issue now. I think that's sort of disappearing off to saying, what's the point? As I think you're saying as well, Margaret.
well, partly, but my question was, setting that issue aside, are there any ideas being proposed for how you would interact to zoom in on particular areas?
Only using the AR/VR techniques currently, but they are the techniques around gaming, AR/VR, and virtual production. There's a lot of work going on now in virtual sets using OLED walls, screens as walls, to get, instead of using green screen, blue screen. An awful lot to having very, very realistic screen backgrounds where you're actually going to get the camera that would normally see the pixel structure of a display. So in production, I can see these displays or groups of displays being used for much, much higher resolution.
Yeah. And
They're
what
infinity,
size of...
Sorry.
Sure. What size of 8K monitors were you envisioning? I'm just trying to get enough background so I can ask a few other people your question.
Well, for virtual production, you are talking of multiple meters in both horizontal and vertical, so maybe 20 meters horizontal.
Okay, so extremely large monitors.
Extremely large monitors, which may have a virtual background. Think of Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, all sci-fi pictures. You think of where they've been using virtual production, now using real backgrounds. Mandalorian, I believe. I hopefully someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
They do that.
Yeah, Yeah, did use real backgrounds, not blue screen, green screen. So you can see within production, and you've got a very high resolution camera, it's probably higher than 8K sensor on it. You need displays that have got much higher resolution, otherwise you're going to get more patterning and everything else you get from pixel structure. So these are being used at the moment, not necessarily for direct viewing, but indirect viewing. And there may be some issues around how you assess the quality or for an image that's going to be used inside another production.
Okay, well, thank you for that insight.
It's worth having a look at that because it's quite fascinating stuff. And anybody that knows about IBC Accelerator, the EBU and several others are now doing what I would call affordable versions of this. How would you build a cheap TV studio where any set could be any set of any size could be included with a video wall? And of course, the ultimate one is always the Eurovision Song Contest. So can I leave you to mull over that? I mean, it's not my area of expertise, but it is beginning to impact some of the work we're doing in program production and the technology around it. Oh, thanks, David, for that. I've just seen your link. Yes, that's the one I was thinking of.
It's very impressive.
It is, and if that image quality wasn't good enough, I know they struggled with it. That's one thing I do know, that it was a struggle because there are no metrics.
Yeah.
Okay, since there seems to be no discussion, I propose we take our break now. Shahid, was there anything else you wanted to cover before we break?
Not really. It was only these two presentations in this session. There is a small session, AVHD session tomorrow evening with only one presentation. That's it.
Okay, and our schedule is that we take our break until 40 minutes after the hour. So we're only breaking 4 minutes early. So we will reconvene at 40 minutes after the hour.
Can I apologise in advance to everybody? I do have to leave almost immediately after. I'd have to leave at the top of the hour for another call, but it's been really fascinating listening to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for coming and bringing up this topic.
It's a pleasure. I'm sorry to annoy people, but one day it'll happen.
Well, no, it's good to mention future technologies, give people some advanced warning, and these topics for future research are definitely of interest.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, everybody. And I will, if I don't speak to you later, I will speak to you next meeting.
Okay, so we will be on break until 40 minutes after the hour. Thank you, everyone.